Joe.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us today for our mini interview, a quick fire round of questions for you just to catch up with how things are going at Future Trees Trust. Tell us a bit about yourself, what led you here, and your role within Future Trees Trust.
I am working now as my role as a researcher at FTT, and I've been here for almost a year. I come from a kind of more academic background. I studied biochemistry at university, did an undergrad and a PhD at Bristol Uni. And after kind of doing that for several years, enjoyed that, wanted to find a way of kind of doing practical research a bit more out of the lab, getting outside and working on more kind of environmental living systems. And yeah, so I kind of did some volunteer work for a while after I left the university, and then this job came along, and it's been great. It has kind of sits in the middle of many different things, and it's been like the perfect role. Really enjoyed it.
Brilliant. Can you tell us a little bit about what your role entails, sort of the day-to-day things that you get up to?
Sure. So my main role is to assist Joe Clark, who's our head of research. So it's kind of the two of us, and we kind of do all the boots on the ground stuff that the charity do. So assessing trials, planting trials, going around the country and looking for the trees, whether they are plus trees, so these kind of like superior timber trees, or trees that might be more resistant to certain diseases that we have in the country. Doing all that kind of work on the ground and then writing it all up, doing some kind of analysis, report writing, and kind of conveying it to the public as well. So yeah, it's been busy. There's lots of projects running in parallel.
So what are you currently working on right now that's significant to Future Trees Trust? Is there anything that is quite big that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I suppose, well, we're now just heading into winter, and so the winter is always the busy fieldwork season. And we have a big project this year. We're assessing a series of oak trials. So these are dotted all over the country. They're what are called progeny trials. So these plus trees that have been identified in woodlands around the country. We've gone and taken seed from those trees, grown those seed up and planted them out in trials. That was done 18 years ago. So the trees are now anywhere from 6 to sometimes 10 meters tall, depending on the site. And they're kind of in need of, well, they're now 18 years old. So we're doing this final assessment over this winter period. Once that's done, then we'll be able to look at the data, show which families and which trees are performing worst at each site, which trees are the best trees for growth and for form. And then we can remove those poorer trees, thin, maybe 2/3 of the site, and leave the best trees behind. And then basically convert those sites into seed orchards so that those remaining really kind of best performing trees can pollinate, can produce acorns, and this will be a really great supply of British high quality acorns for the forestry industry and anyone wanting to plant oak for timber purposes. So that's a major project. Well, it's been going on since 2003, and this will be the last round of assessments, and then we'll start removing the trees and converting them to orchards, which will be quite exciting.
Fabulous. So why is this work so important? What is it about what Future Trees Trust does that's important?
Well, I think with that oak project, I mean, we just don't have a very reliable or large enough source of acorns or many of the broadleaf species that we work with in the UK. Not only seed, but we import, around 95% of the sawn hardwood timber that we use in this country. Britain has a notoriously low, especially England has a very low tree cover, and there's obviously all these aims now, big targets on tree planting, and if people are planting for timber purposes, then you want to make sure that the trees you're planting are going to not only produce you really good timber and strong tall trees, but there's genetic resilience, there's resilience to disease, potential to adapt to climate change and other scenarios. And so the work that we're trying to do is investigating all of this. It's informing some of these decisions that foresters can make, and improving the kind of stock that people can use to plant. So for all those timber reasons, I think a lot of what we're doing is quite important. Another one of our major projects is the Living Ash project, which is using the same kind of selective breeding approach, but instead of for timber purposes, we're looking for ash trees that show tolerance to ash dieback, the fungal disease that's causing a huge amount of damage across Europe. And so in that work, we're looking for these tolerant trees out in woodlands, taking cuttings, grafting them, and bringing those together in this large archive in southern England. And we'll be continually assessing those over the next number of years. And then the best performing trees there, the ones with the most tolerance, we're going to use to hopefully plant out orchards and again produce seed, be British seed, and it'll also be seed that shows a greater tolerance to the disease than wild ash, and we can use that then to replant. So I think those two streams of the way we're using selective breeding both have got really positive implications, hopefully, alongside all this tree planting that we hope to see come over the next few years.
Wonderful. So you truly are securing a future for Britain's broadleaf trees.
You could say that, yeah.
Excellent.
One of many people.
Can you tell us more about the UK Forest Genetic Resources platform that has just been launched recently, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. So that's it's been kind of a while in the making and the kind of planning. It's mainly a product of a strategy that was written last year, which is a strategy for UK Forest Genetic Resources. It was a collaborative report written by us and the Woodland Trust and Forest Research, UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and Royal Botanic Gardens Kew. And that was a way of trying to bring lots of organisations together, increase the understanding of the forest genetic resources we have in this country and how we can best use them. So the platform is a kind of product of that, and it aims to have in one place all of these resources in a kind of easy to use, freely available map-based system. And so it will show a whole range of the resources that we have in the UK. So the plus trees I mentioned, all of the trials that FTT have put out, and then more kind of conservation end of things. There are these things called genetic conservation units, which are certain areas of woodland which have been designated as important for certain species. And so there's one in Britain at the moment, and there's quite a few more in the pipeline. And we're hoping to include some of Kew's seed collection data on there as well in the future. So it's great that it's been launched, and it feels like there's quite a lot on there, but ultimately we want to get as many organisations for as many species as possible. It's very broadleaf heavy at the moment, as you might imagine. So yeah, it's great that it's live and people can start using it, and we want to try and convince more people to put their sites on there.
Brilliant. So you'll be able to give us more of an update next year and give us a tour of the platform. Yes,
that's the plan. We've got some changes and some upgrades planned and in the pipeline. So when they're done, I think that'd be a good time to do a tour. Yeah, sure.
Fantastic, exciting stuff. What should someone who wants to do what you're doing, what's the best route for them to take?
Well, I suppose my route into forestry is slightly unorthodox, I guess, because I come from this more academic biochemistry background, but I'd say any kind of researcher role, you could do that in many fields, and the best way towards that is by studying the things that you're interested in and you want to ultimately research. I mean, my background is at school. I kind of always knew that I wanted to do something scientific. It was fairly typical in that way. And so for my A-levels, I did maths, chemistry and biology, and then kind of merged those three to go to biochemistry at university. And I guess my PhD was different from what I'm doing now. But there's no doubt that the things that I learned in my PhD, the way that you approach the scientific method and what research entails is kind of broadly applicable. So it's definitely useful in doing the research that I'm doing now, as well as in other forms of research. But I'd say anyone who wanted to do this role now, that route in is one way, but going from a more standard forestry route is definitely a route as well. So James Cryer, who's our Patsy Wood scholar, comes from a much more straight forestry background, and he brings a whole different and important skill set to the stuff we do as well.